I really don't know how to start this one off today because the 4Kids dub has such a terrible reputation, and I just didn't know how bad it was. I knew it was pretty god-awful, but I didn't know how bad they went. Like, I just thought they were gonna take out a few guns there, take out some blood here, and, you know, obviously everybody knows the example of they got rid of Sanji's cigarette. I thought that was the extent of all the changes, but apparently not. They got way ahead of themselves. Also, while on the topic about Sanji's cigarette, or should I say lack thereof, I'd like to express my thoughts and opinions on that. It's of course the most notorious change, and it's one that most people will bring up, including myself beforehand. First off, why did they decide to give him a lollipop? That's like I want to say the lamest item, because there could have been so many good ideas that they could have thrown in as a decent replacement. I mean, what about a toothpick? What about a piece of straw? Anything but a damn lollipop. At that point, just give him a fucking binky and just call it a day. Like, this is just ridiculous. This may sound somewhat of an odd point, but one of Sanji's signature character traits was that he always smoked. He always lit up his cigarette before and after a battle, and whenever he did that, it set a really badass tone. It set the mood proper. Getting rid of that just ruins the overall atmosphere, and sometimes it's actually used in a very clever way for storytelling. I was watching the Water 7 arc. I'm still currently on that. It's a wonderful arc, by the way. He was hiding in a dark alley, and then boom, he lit up his cigarette, revealing that he was secretly hiding there. And what an awesome way to reveal that this is where Sanji was the entire time. God, imagine if the 4Kids dub actually went up until the Water 7 arc. Man, they probably would just replace that scene with like a lantern or something. But yeah, guys, let's think about the kids. Let's not make smoking look cool, because you know what? At the end of the day, storytelling doesn't matter, tone doesn't matter. It's about the kids. Aside from this point, Sanji cannot be seen lighting his cigarette because, you know, obviously now he doesn't have one. So obviously that needs to be edited out, and that leads to another problem. There's really awkward transitions that are never supposed to be there because it was never supposed to be tempered or spliced up. Speaking of awkward transitions, there are a fair amount of these examples, but for completely different causes. Let me explain. Apparently 4Kids just thought it was too violent for people to get punched in the face. Instead, they trimmed out the frames where the impact of a fist or foot would land on someone's face or body part. So, instead of a satisfying fucking punch to the face, we get the worst transitional editing I've ever seen. They make my video editing skills look like a masterful piece of art. And worst of all, sometimes you'll have no idea what the fuck is going on.
Let me make this simple. Luffy asked me to bring back Nami at any cost, so that's the plan, alright? And sitting around talking about it won't get it done. Let's go. Hey! What are you guys doing? Cut it out!
Yeah, you're not alone if you had no idea what was happening in that scene. 4Kids decided to take out this one frame of animation that pretty much explained everything about said scene. The reason, presumably, was that they didn't want people to see Zoro getting hit by a hammer, which is just ridiculous. The idea of getting hit by a hammer is pretty much the stereotypical idea of cartoon violence. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you'd find in like Tom and Jerry, but apparently that's not acceptable for the children. So yeah, they took that out, and then as a result, it just leads to total confusion because all you hear is just them roughhousing. I mean, God, that could be anything. You just put your imagination together. And then you just see Zoro tied up, you're like, well, what the hell happened? And it's just so drastic because he's making this epic speech, how they're gonna, you know, charge into Arlong Park and save Nami, all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, there's just roughhousing. It's like, what's going on? But at least within the original version, there's a bit of context to know what's gonna happen. And then actually, it's pretty funny, right? There's a good comedical point. 4Kids version, it just loses all this. Man, it's kind of wild how 1 or 2 frames of animation can really change the tone or message of an entire scene, but nevertheless, even stranger is the audio department. 4Kids decided to make their own opening, and, well, they sure nailed originality, and it's not like One Piece. One Piece is a timeless story. This acid trip, on the other hand, just sounds so outdated. This belongs in the early 2000s and should stay there. And yes, I am aware that many enjoy this factor. It has its shit appeal, and I can't lie, it grew on me a bit as well. Currently listening to this while writing up this script, it's so bad, it's so good. Furthermore, something that's really jarring is the voice acting. And look, before I say this, I have nothing personal against any of these actors, but who the hell thought this was acceptable?
It's probably height and not able to get food for itself. Huh, pal?
It sounds like he has a really bad case of a cold and just simply refuses to not blow his nose on set. And it just confuses me. Why this voice? Why this voice with Sanji? One of the coolest characters, as I mentioned before. I just don't get their motive here. You have a character that kicks a lot of ass. I'd say somewhat acts mature. I mean, yeah, I guess he kind of does simp a bit, but aside from that, he's a pretty sophisticated adult character. Why give him this sneezily drippy voice that just totally undermines anything that he brings to the conversation at hand when he's interacting with the other characters? I can't take him seriously, and that's the saddest thing possible because, I mean, frankly, Sanji's one of my favorite characters of the show. I mean, I like the whole cast, of course, but when I can't take their voices seriously, that's a big problem. And you know what else is perturbing? Robin's voice. I'm just so confused on why they decided to go with a southern accent. It's just so out of left field, and wait, please, don't tell me this is because she wears that cowboy hat. I mean, that's just totally too much on the mark. That's ridiculous. Like, God, what drugs were the producers on? Yeah, she has a cowboy hat. First thing that would come into mind, yeah, let's give her a nice southern accent. And it doesn't even make sense for the character itself. Robin is somewhat of a monotone character, but that's kind of what makes her personality interesting. It plays on with her intelligence, her quiet nature. And actually, I think it helps with the bit of the comedy that they try to play around with her, you know? That monotone mentality can lead to some really cool, awkward humor. But when you add this southern accent into the mix, you lose all that. And you know what the weirdest thing about this? The weirdest thing. When I was doing research, right, I wanted to compare and contrast the sub voice, the 4Kids dub, and the Funimation dub. And oddly enough, the 4Kids dub voice actress was Veronica Taylor. Yeah, that Veronica Taylor. Man, it is quite a small world after all. Though, I guess in retrospect, 4Kids did help out in making the Pokemon dub, so it does make somewhat sense that they would reuse some of the voice actors for some of their other productions. And with this in mind, I suppose this isn't an issue with the voice actors. It's more of an issue with the direction that they decided to take. Okay, let's dive into the real meat of the argument. The real insults, the stuff that triggered me so much. It's probably the reason why I decided to make this video in the first place. And to set up my point, I want to make it clear that perhaps, yeah, it's understandable they may want to censor blood, recolor alcohol, and to get rid of any reference to smoking. But it's completely different when they radically change the tone and plot of the entire story. An example of where this occurs is within episode 4. Famously, Shanks gets a gun stuck up to his head. It's probably one of the most intense scenes within the early parts of the show. So you would think, how could they ruin this? Well, first and foremost, the gun isn't a real gun, it's just a cork gun. This is completely obvious. And two, the guy that Shanks's crew member killed isn't actually dead. And the way they explain this, I don't even really understand, but it just somehow works.
When he wakes up, someone tell him it was a cap gun.
That wasn't fair. He was alright home.
Can someone explain that last part to me? quote unquote, he's our only ride home. I don't understand that, and I compared both versions, and that is not in the original. So they made that up entirely. I just don't understand this. Are they referring to the fact that he's the only one who could pilot the ship? Which, then again, that doesn't really make sense, because you're telling me out of an entire pirate crew, this one random crewmate is the only one who could drive the ship. Yeah, I'm not buying that. Nevertheless, the real shame here to talk about is how much of a joke this looks compared to the official version. And the original, it's super intense. When I first watched this, I was like dang, what's gonna happen? You know, I'm literally on the edge of my seat waiting to see the outcome of this situation. I'm invested, I'm having fun. But instead, 4Kids thought it would be a splendid idea to neuter the entire scene, including its main lesson. Guns aren't for threats, they're for action. In other words, if you're gonna pull out a gun, put your money where your mouth is. Ironically, 4Kids opts in to do the opposite thing. It almost betrays the original's meaning. Instead, this dub didn't uphold its promise to faithfully replicate the original as best as it possibly could. In a nutshell, 4Kids didn't put its money where its mouth was. Either way, I want to throw another example, being Zoro's childhood rival. Apparently, according to 4Kids lore, she's not dead. And the explanation is, I suppose, somewhat creative. I mean, that's the thing with these changes, right? I mean, they're over the top silly, but at least they got kind of creative and had to work within the boundaries of the animation that they were given to dub over. Frankly, I would explain the alteration that was made, but I don't know, whenever I'm I have the script right next to me, and I obviously wrote something to say, but whenever I say it out loud, it just sounds so stupid and it doesn't make sense, and it sounds really awkward the way I'm explaining it, so I'm just gonna let the scene do that itself. You know, it's kind of one of those things, show me, don't tell me, so here you go.
Karina, she's at the hospital. She was fighting some guy and defeated him. But then he came back with friends and hurt her because he was embarrassed to be beat by a girl.
I obviously have a lot of issues with this change because not only is it destroying the original writer's intention, it also just, like I said earlier, it just neuters the idea, the moral, the lesson, the tone, the context. You know, there's a lot more seriousness when you talk about death, and I think it's definitely an okay topic to bring up, even in a quote-unquote children's show. I mean, it's not like the death occurs off screen. Like, I understand that there was some gruesome, painful death, you know, gore, all that stuff, that they would want to censor that out, but this death doesn't even occur on screen whatsoever. It's only mentioned, so it can't even have the mere mentioning of death. That's kinda ridiculous. Second point that I want to bring up is the dub loses a lot of that impact on Zoro. His childhood rival's death was ironically a huge motivator for him to become the world's best swordsman. I don't know, it's just more meaningful this way. I mean, look at him. Zoro's training in vain. You could definitely feel for him. There's no one to blame for her death. It was just an accident. There's no villain to point the finger at. There's no closure. That's the worst thing, and there's no closure, where you gotta make your own closure on said matter. I prefer the original's approach a lot better. It just provides much more of a bitter mood, a bitter ending to it all. Okay, the final example I want to present. And look, I'm sure there's definitely more instances of ridiculous changes within this dub, but I think you guys kind of get the point here, and who knows, maybe I'll make a part 2 in the future. Either way, let's just dive right into this. And the topic at hand is Bellemir's death. Now, if you haven't watched this dub, then you're probably like, okay, how did they edit this out? How did they trim this out? How did they tamper with the original content where she doesn't die? Well, if you must know, 4Kids gratefully changed the situation at hand. They crafted this intense scene into something quite magical. Apparently, to 4Kids lore, Arlong was such a nice guy, such a nice Chad, he decided, you know what, death is not cool. We cannot let the kids cry of death. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, if you look at it in her case, Bellemir was spared. And you know what? Arlong, the great man he is, decided just to throw her into the fucking dungeon and end it there. So, I mean, as you can see, I'm a little bit perturbed, which is just complete horseshit. What a way to twist the meaning. And they got really creative. They got really creative. Like, surprisingly, like, I give them 110% on the math test. I may have been a little bit too angry back there, but I think my point still stands, and while, I took a break after that segment, I wanted to think, why did I get so triggered back there? Like, why? I mean, obviously I know the 4Kids dub is a complete joke. It should be treated as such. And, obviously now we have the Funimation dub, we have the sub. Why am I talking about, like, an over-decade-old version of a television show that was designed for children? I don't know. I mean, I had to think about that. Well, why did that trigger me so much? Why does that get under my skin? And I think it's because I don't like the idea of censoring or drastically censoring something just to appeal to everybody or just to appeal for children, because I think children shouldn't be treated like idiots. I mean, I think they could be treated like adults. I think that's the best way to look at it, And the thing that I guess you could say would kind of keep me up at night, right, is I don't understand their motive at the end of the day. Like, what were they trying to hide from the quote-unquote children of America? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're telling me a kid has never seen someone with a tattoo? You're telling me a kid has never seen someone down a bottle of beer? I mean, you can go into a convenience store and just find a 6-pack in the freezer aisle. There's nothing surprising about that whatsoever. And there's definitely kids out there who have parents that smoke. That's just statistical fact. I think the worst thing about this is, could you imagine watching this like you grew up with this? I mean, I'm sure like at the time you really wouldn't have obviously noticed the difference. You would have nothing to compare it to. But imagine growing up, you're an adult now or a teenager later on in life, and then you look back on like One Piece in general, and that's all you have to remember this show by, this series by. I mean, that's just sad, because ironically speaking, One Piece in general, I'd say appeals to a lot of people. I think it appeals to general audience, adults and kids. It has very serious matters, but I like that. It takes the viewer seriously, and then the viewer could take the show seriously. And for the record, of course, there is a gray line with censorship. I mean, now if Robin was topless running around in the show, I mean, I would love that, but obviously that's not gonna happen, unfortunately. There is a gray line with these sort of things that are gonna be part of a story for a mass audience. If I had to say, I feel like it would be, let's be thankful that we got the sub, and we have the Funimation dub. I don't know if the Funimation dub is that good or I'm presuming it's okay. Let's be thankful we have those two viable options to watch this show. I mean, imagine if 4Kids dub was still going on. But, let's be thankful that there's other shows, there's other manga series that don't care about censorship. They're willing to tell their stories, no matter how bloody, no matter how gory, no matter how crazy this story is. Whatever the artists, the writers, and visual intention was, they're gonna put that on paper. Actually, that's kind of why I want to read Berserk. I heard that manga's really insane. Nevertheless, I'm kind of digressing here a bit. I want to end it off on this one last thing. If I ever had kids, one day, right, like the 1% chance I ever had children, they're never watching the 4Kids dub, they're gonna watch the OG sub, Bellamir's death, and all.
Why the need for so much gruesome, graphic violence? Why not let us imagine
Because it's so much fun, Jan. Get it?
Oh, really? Okay, I'd like to see you walk down the street and get attacked by some kids who've just seen your movie.
But see, Jan, you're all messed up because you're talking about real life.
Oh,
and I'm talking about the movies. You gotta get it straight. Now, if you want to talk about the movies, we'll talk about the movies.
Okay, and kids
at 12
can tell the difference.
we'll talk about real life.
Kids at 12 can tell the difference. You tell their parents that, Quentin.
I saw movies when I was a kid, all right? I saw all the movies that I'm basing my movies on are the movies I saw as a kid, and yes, kids go to a movie theater, they can tell the difference. Maybe you couldn't when you were a kid, but I could.